The hand closed around my wrist before I could take one more step. I felt the warm loaf slip against my ribs, hidden under my coat, and my heart dropped into my stomach. I had almost made it out the door. Almost. "Caught you," the guard said, his voice thick with satisfaction. "Little thief. I am Lyra. I am 17 years old if you count time the way humans do, and in that moment I was not thinking about myself at all. I was thinking about Nira, who is 7, and Poole, who is 5, waiting for me in a cold room 3 streets away, waiting for food that might never come now. The guard's fingers dug into my wrist hard enough to bruise. He was a big man named Garrick, and everyone on Threll Street knew his name because everyone on Threll Street had been afraid of him at some point. "Please," I said, "let me explain." "Explain to the magistrate," Garrick said, dragging me back through the door I had just slipped out of. "Stealing from a human's kitchen. You picked the wrong place to steal from, girl." The kitchen was warm and bright, full of smells I could never afford, and standing at the center of it, wiping his hands on an apron dusted with flour, was the human everyone on this street talked about in careful whispers. His name was Daniel Carter, and he had opened this kitchen only a few months earlier, in a part of the city where most people did not expect a human to stay for long. He turned when Garrick shoved me forward, and I braced myself for what came next. I had seen it happen before, to others like me. The shouting first, then the punishment, then being thrown out into the cold with nothing. But Daniel did not shout. He looked at me, and then he looked at the loaf that had fallen out from under my coat and rolled across the floor, and something in his face changed. It was not anger. It was something closer to sadness. "How old are your siblings?" he asked. The question hit me harder than Garrick's grip ever could. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "There is flour on your sleeve," Daniel said quietly, "from where you patted a smaller loaf into your pocket before you took the bigger one for yourself. That is not how a thief behaves. That is how someone behaves when they are trying to make food last for more than one meal. So I will ask again, how old are they?" 7 and 5, I whispered, because lying suddenly felt impossible in front of him. Garrick tightened his grip on my arm. "Sir, if you give the word, I will take her to the magistrate. There is a fine system for these things. 2 coins for every finger. That is the standard rate for a first offense, and—" "Let go of her," Daniel said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Garrick's hand opened and released my wrist, as though the words themselves had pushed it away. Daniel crouched down until his eyes were level with mine. No one on this street had ever done that before. No one bent down to look at me. They either looked past me or looked down at me, but never at me. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "Here is what is going to happen now. You are going to sit at that table by the fire, and I am going to finish cooking, because it seems I have a thief in my kitchen who did not know that if she had simply knocked on the front door and asked, I would have given her the bread for nothing. That is a mistake on my part. I should put up a sign." Garrick's face twisted in confusion. "Sir, you cannot be serious. She stole from you. The law says." "I run a kitchen," Daniel said, standing back up to his full height. "My whole purpose here is to feed people. If a hungry child steals from me instead of asking, that is not a crime problem. That is a problem with how welcoming my kitchen looks from the outside. I intend to fix that." Garrick opened his mouth again, but something in Daniel's calm, steady voice made him close it. "You may go," Daniel added, "or you may stay and eat something yourself, because you look like you have not had a proper meal in some time either, and a hungry guard makes poor decisions. The choice is yours, but no one is being taken to any magistrate tonight." Garrick left quickly, his boots echoing down the street outside. I sat frozen at the small wooden table, watching a human move calmly around his kitchen, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. I had heard stories about humans my whole life. Some said they were cold and distant. Some said they only cared for their own kind, and that species like mine, called the Varen, were beneath their notice entirely. I had grown up believing those stories, because nothing in my life had ever proven them wrong. Daniel proved them wrong that night without even trying. He filled a large pot with vegetables and some kind of seasoned meat I did not recognize, and set it to cook over the fire, filling the kitchen with a smell so rich it made my eyes water. When it was ready, he ladled it into a container that looked, very precisely, like it was meant to feed exactly 3 people. "This is for you and your siblings," he said, placing it in front of me along with 2 wrapped loaves of bread. "There should be enough here for tonight and tomorrow, if you are careful with it. But you do not need to be careful, because you are coming back here tomorrow, at midday. I have work for you. Washing dishes, cutting vegetables, whatever your hands can manage. I will pay you properly. Real coin, not scraps from a bin." "Why?" The word came out smaller than I meant it to. You do not know me. I am Varen. Everyone says your kind does not. I do not care what everyone says, Daniel said, wiping his hands on his apron again, as though this conversation was the least remarkable thing that had happened to him all week. I care that a girl on this street is skipping her own meals so 2 younger children can eat, and that stops as of tonight. Everything else we can figure out as we go. I did not understand him, not that night, and not for a long while afterward, but I understood enough to know that my life had just changed direction, even if I could not yet see where the new path led. I walked home carrying warm food for the first time in longer than I could remember, and when I opened the door to our small room, Nira and Poole looked up from where they sat huddled together under a thin blanket. Lyra, Nira said, her voice cracking with hope and worry at once. Did you find anything? I set the pot down between them, and watched their faces light up in a way I had not seen in weeks. That night, for the first time in a long time, none of us went to sleep hungry. The next day I returned to Daniel's kitchen exactly as he had asked, half expecting him to have changed his mind, half expecting the whole thing to have been some cruel trick. But he was there, sleeves rolled up, already at work, and when he saw me, he simply handed me an apron and pointed to a stack of vegetables that needed cutting. Wash your hands first, he said, then we will begin. That was how it started. Small jobs at first. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, carrying crates from the back door to the storage room. Daniel paid me at the end of each day, real coin pressed into my palm, more than enough to keep the 3 of us fed and warm. He never once brought up the stolen loaf again, as though it had simply never happened. Word spread quickly through Threll Street. A human running a kitchen was unusual enough. A human who had taken in a Varen girl caught stealing and given her honest work instead of punishment was the kind of story people repeated over cups of tea and in doorways after dark. Some people whispered that Daniel was foolish, that he did not understand how dangerous kindness could be on a street like ours. Others whispered that he understood something the rest of us had forgotten. I did not care what anyone whispered. I only cared that Nira and Poole had food in their stomachs and a roof that did not leak, thanks to the extra coin I now earned. A few weeks into my work at the kitchen, a different kind of trouble arrived. It came in the form of a merchant named Corwin Blake, a heavy-set man who ran the largest supply house on Threll Street and controlled much of the flour, grain, and oil that every kitchen in the district depended on. Corwin did not like Daniel. He did not like that a newcomer, and a human at that, had opened a kitchen without paying the usual fees that Corwin quietly collected from every other business on the street. Fees that never appeared on any official record but that everyone paid anyway, out of fear more than anything else. Corwin arrived at the kitchen on a gray afternoon, flanked by 2 large men I did not recognize, and demanded to speak with Daniel directly. You have been operating here for months, Corwin said, his voice smooth but edged with warning, without paying what every other business pays. I have been patient. My patience is no longer unlimited. Daniel did not stop chopping the vegetables in front of him. I pay my taxes to the city, he said. I am not aware of any other fee I owe. There are certain arrangements, Corwin said, that keep a business running smoothly on this street. Without them, supplies can become difficult to find, flour can run short, oil can become scarce. These things happen, unfortunately, in places like this. I stood near the back of the kitchen, gripping a cutting knife tightly, watching this exchange with a fear I recognized all too well. I had seen Corwin's men before, walking the street, collecting coin from shopkeepers who handed it over with shaking hands and forced smiles. Daniel finally set down his knife and looked directly at Corwin. Let me make sure I understand you correctly, he said. You are telling me that unless I pay you money that is not owed under any law, my supplies might mysteriously disappear. I would not phrase it so crudely, Corwin said, smiling thinly. But you understand the situation. I understand it perfectly, Daniel said. And my answer is no. Corwin's smile faded slightly. That is an unwise answer. It is the only honest one I have, Daniel replied. Now, if there is nothing else, I have a kitchen to run, and people waiting on their food. Corwin left without another word, but the look on his face as he walked out told me this was far from finished. Over the following days, exactly as Corwin had threatened, our usual suppliers began turning us away. The flour merchant claimed he had none to spare. The oil seller said his stock had already been promised elsewhere. Even the vegetable cart that normally passed by each morning took a different route, avoiding our street entirely. I watched Daniel's shelves grow emptier by the day, and I began to worry that everything he had built, everything that had given my family a chance at a better life, was about to collapse under the weight of one greedy man's anger. But Daniel did not panic. Instead, he called me over one evening after we had closed the kitchen for the night. Lyra, he said, you know this street better than I do. You know the people, the paths, the places I have never seen. I need your help. I nodded, uncertain what he meant. There are other districts in this city, he continued. Places Corwin does not control. If we can find suppliers there, willing to trade with us directly, we do not need to depend on anyone here at all. Over the next several days, Daniel and I traveled together to parts of the city I had never dared to visit before. Districts where Varen like me were treated with even less regard than on Threll Street. But something strange happened each time we arrived somewhere new. People saw Daniel first, a human standing beside a young Varen girl, clearly working together, clearly respecting one another, and their assumptions seemed to shift, even if only slightly. We found a grain merchant on the far side of the river willing to sell to us directly, at a fair price, simply because Daniel treated her with the same respect he showed everyone else. We found an oil seller who remembered Daniel from a chance meeting weeks earlier and was glad to help. Slowly, piece by piece, we rebuilt the supply chain that Corwin had tried to destroy, without ever needing to pay him a single coin. When Corwin realized his plan had failed, he did not give up quietly. He sent his men to stand outside the kitchen each day, discouraging customers from entering, spreading quiet rumors that the food inside was unsafe, that the human chef could not be trusted. Business slowed. Some of our regular customers stopped coming, frightened by the rumors or by the sight of Corwin's men lingering outside. I watched Daniel grow more tired each day, though he never once complained or spoke of giving up. It was Nira, of all people, who gave me the idea that changed everything. One evening, as I told her about the trouble at the kitchen, she said something simple, the kind of thing only a child could say without realizing how important it was. Why don't you just tell everyone the truth yourself? Show them what really happens there. The next morning, I asked Daniel if I could speak to the street directly, in the open market square where people gathered each day to trade and gossip. He agreed, though I could tell he was uncertain what I intended to do. I stood in the square that afternoon, in front of dozens of people who knew me as the Varen girl who used to beg for scraps, and I told them my story. I told them about the night I stole a loaf of bread to feed my siblings, and how instead of punishment, I had been given food, work, and a chance at a life I never thought possible. I told them how Daniel had traveled with me to distant districts, treating everyone we met with the same fairness, never once looking down on anyone for what they were. I told them the rumors about unsafe food were lies, spread by a man who cared more about his own profit than about the people on this street. A silence fell over the square when I finished speaking. Then, slowly, an old woman named Priya, who ran a small fabric stall nearby, stepped forward. I have eaten at that kitchen many times, she said loudly, for everyone to hear. The food has always been good, better than good. I do not believe these rumors for one moment. Others began to speak up as well, sharing their own experiences, their own small kindnesses received from Daniel over the months since he had arrived. By the time the sun began to set, a small crowd had gathered outside the kitchen, not to avoid it, but to eat there, as if in quiet defiance of everything Corwin had tried to do. Corwin never returned to the kitchen after that day. Whether he realized his plan had failed completely, or whether he simply decided the trouble was no longer worth the effort, I never learned. But his men stopped appearing outside our door, and slowly, the street returned to something like normal, only better than before. Months passed. The kitchen grew busier than ever, with people coming not just from Threll Street but from across the city, drawn by stories of the human chef who had taken in a Varen thief and turned her into something more. Daniel taught me everything he knew about cooking, about running a kitchen, about treating every person who walked through the door with the same respect, regardless of where they came from or what species they were. Nira and Poole grew up healthy and strong, no longer huddled under thin blankets waiting for uncertain meals. Poole, in particular, developed a habit of hanging around the kitchen after his lessons, insisting he was strong enough to carry crates twice his size, much to Daniel's amusement. One evening, nearly 3 years after that first night, I stood in the same kitchen where everything had begun, wearing my own apron now, teaching Nira how to properly knead dough while Poole stacked crates in the corner with far more effort than necessary. Daniel watched from across the room, the same calm expression on his face that I remembered from that very first night. "You know," he said, "you have gotten quite good at this." "I had a good teacher," I replied. "You had a good foundation," he said. "I only gave you the chance to build on it." I thought back often to that night, to the moment Garrick's hand had closed around my wrist, certain that my life was about to become even harder than it already was. Instead, everything had changed direction entirely, because one person had chosen to look past what I was and see who I could become. I never forgot the lesson in that. Kindness, offered without condition, could change the entire shape of a life. Not just mine, but Nira's, and Pool's, and even, in small ways, the shape of an entire street that had once believed such kindness simply did not exist. Some people conquer. Some people judge without ever looking closely enough to understand what they are judging. But some people, when they find a hungry child standing in their kitchen with stolen bread hidden under her coat, choose instead to quietly change everything. One meal, one kindness, one honest chance at a time. That choice, more than anything else, was what built the life I now had, and I intended to carry that same choice forward, for anyone else who ever needed it, for as long as I lived.